If a serial killer had previously lived in your home, would you want to know? Even for those that don't believe in ghosts or the paranormal, the thought that multiple people had their lives taken from them in the place you now call home can be truly disturbing. For some, their house's history is too creepy for them to stay, while others embrace the past and continue to live completely ordinary lives. These are 5 homes serial killers used to live in with disturbing backstories. Number 5. When Zetta Pinder heard news that her ex-boyfriend had been arrested for murdering 3 women, she was shocked, but she'd known for 10 years that there was something disturbing about the man she once dated. Pinder broke up with Stephen Griffiths, whom she had been dating for 2 years, after he brought her to his flat for the first time. There, she saw his collection of hundreds of true crime books and graphic videos. On the wall were samurai swords. Leaning against his television was a crossbow. She was so disturbed, she immediately asked Griffiths to take her home. Once he left, she called and broke up with him. Pinder forgot about her ex and moved on with her life. Griffiths moved on with his as well. In 2010, he was caught on CCTV outside his block of flats chasing after a woman who'd escaped from his home. The woman was 36-year-old Suzanne Blamiers, a prostitute who had gone missing a few days earlier. Griffiths tackled Suzanne flat before shooting her with a crossbow. He then gestured to the CCTV camera he knew would be watching him. The caretaker responsible for reviewing the footage immediately contacted police, and he was arrested the same day. He proudly told police Suzanne wasn't his only victim. Police discovered he was responsible for the disappearance of 2 other prostitutes who had gone missing earlier that year, Shelley Armitage and Susan Rushworth. It's believed parts of both women were cooked and eaten in his flat. In court, he gave his name as the Crossbow Cannibal, referring to tabloids that called his crimes the Crossbow Cannibal killings. Despite speculation about his mental health, he was convicted for all 3 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment. Today, Griffith's flat has been redecorated and no longer resembles the macabre home Pinder visited. It's currently rented by another student who was told about the grim history. While his mother felt spooked when visiting, the flat's history doesn't bother him. Number 4. More than 5,000 human bones were found in a 2-week search of the Fox Hollow Farm in 1996. The buried and burned remains are believed to belong to at least 11 people, all alleged victims of Herb Baumeister. Baumeister had lived on the property with his wife and 3 children. From the outside, they looked like a perfectly normal family, though financial and personal problems put a strain on his marriage. His wife Julie tried to stand by her husband as their store, Save-A-Lot, struggled on, but his unstable mental state and unprovoked rages often prompted her to take the children and stay at her mother's condo. While she was away, Baumeister would cruise the Indianapolis gay scene, often picking up men who would mysteriously disappear. At first, police had no way of linking Baumeister to the string of disappearances that were plaguing the city, until a man given the pseudonym Tony Harris came forward. Harris claimed he'd met a man named Brian Smart at a gay bar who'd brought him back to Fox Hollow. Smart apparently had a strangulation fetish and began to asphyxiate him with a garden hose. Smart took the act too far, and it almost cost Harris his life. Thankfully, he was able to get away, and Harris now believed Smart was responsible for the disappearances. Police soon learned Smart was actually Baumeister and approached him and his wife at the property. With only a sexual encounter gone wrong to base their suspicion on, they were unable to get a warrant, and Baumeister refused to allow them to search the property. However, Julie's suspicions about her husband were growing, and when Baumeister was out of town, she allowed the police to search the property. Only 11 of the people whose remains were found buried underneath Fox Hollow could be identified, but police believe as many as 21 could have been buried there. Baumeister killed himself before he could be captured and put on trial. Julie and the children left Fox Hollow, and the land has since been split and sold to various people. One such landowner, who bought 8 acres of the farm, intended to build 3 homes on the site and to live in one of them. He just hopes nothing other than stories have been left behind. Number 3. Dorothy Puente preyed on the most vulnerable members of society for no other reason than to take their money. Even before, Puente converted her 16-room Victorian mansion into a boarding house in Sacramento, there were plenty of warning signs that suggested she wasn't doing this out of the goodness of her heart. She'd already been arrested and jailed for check fraud and operating a brothel when she opened this boarding house in 1981. She was known to take and read her residents' mail, collecting any money and checks and giving them an allowance while keeping the rest of the money for herself. Her first confirmed murder took place in 1982. A friend and business partner, Ruth Monroe, had been renting out one of the rooms. In April of that year, the 62-year-old was found dead due to drug overdose. Puente claimed her friend had been depressed and police ruled the death a suicide. A few weeks later, she was accused of drugging a 74-year-old man and stealing his pension. Puente was arrested and found guilty, but was only sentenced to 5 years in prison and only served 3. While in prison, she'd begun corresponding with a pen pal, 77-year-old Everson Gilmeth. Everson would be her next victim. She moved in with Everson after her release and quickly put her name on his checking account, giving her access to his pension. Almost immediately afterward, he was killed. Puente dumped his body in the Sacramento River. Though the body was found the next day, it would be years until he was identified. In that time, Puente continued to collect his pension as if nothing was wrong. She continued to board elderly people and disabled people, murdering them and taking their money. She'd killed several of those people in her care before she was finally caught. A social worker had reported Alberto Montoya missing after he missed several of his meetings. Alberto was developmentally disabled and schizophrenic and living in Puente's house. Police searched the house, finding freshly disturbed dirt in her back garden. 7 bodies were found. Puente was found guilty of 9 murders, including Alberto and Everson's, and the home went up for sale. The building is currently owned by Barbara and Tom Williams, who moved in 2010. They try to make light out of the murders so visitors don't focus on the dead bodies that were once laid out in the room they now call their bedroom. Number 2. In September of 2016, property developer David Trong bought a picturesque little blue house built in 1946 with plans to flip it. He hired contractor Casey Clopton to tackle the 4-bedroom house, which needed extensive work. A month later, Clopton visited the property with his 11-year-old daughter to survey the scene. According to Clopton, his daughter began to cry when she stepped inside. She said she felt weird and was so uncomfortable Clopton had to cut the visit short. A few of the construction workers Clopton hired felt the same way about the house, and it wasn't long before these unpleasant feelings began to manifest as physical phenomenon. Heavy furniture fell away from the walls when there was nobody in the room. Once, when the crew arrived at the locked house to start work, they found every door and drawer open. In the flooded basement, workers found the words "Help Me" scrawled across a window, which was covered by a screen protector on the outside. Clopton asked the neighbors if they'd noticed anything odd, thinking it could possibly have been pranksters breaking into the house. It was only then that he discovered the house's past. In 1955, a couple and their children moved into the property. They seemed completely normal. One of the neighbors remembered playing with the youngest 2 children and being babysat by their mother. But the couple's eldest child, Ted Bundy, would grow up to be one of the most infamous serial killers the world had ever seen. Ted Bundy likely needs no introduction for any true crime fan. He confessed to killing 30 people, though many officers believe the total was much higher, between 1974 and 1978. Bundy had been around 9 when the family moved into the house Clopton was now working on. The family had moved out of the house before Bundy's first confirmed killing, but many believe he'd already taken a life while still living at the property. In 1961, one of Bundy's neighbors went missing. Bundy was 14 years old when the 8-year-old went missing. She was never found, and her parents suspected Bundy after he was caught for later crimes. Bundy denied any involvement, and DNA testing didn't link him to the disappearance. When Trong discovered the property's history, he didn't advise the house's infamous resident. A priest was brought in to bless the house, and Bible verses were written on the walls beneath the paintwork before it was sold. Number 1. Some people may think ignorance is bliss, but Laura and Richard Coates were not happy when they discovered their realtor had failed to inform them about the dead body found in the garden shed. The Coates had been renting their Monterey home for about 18 months when they decided to purchase it. Naturally, one of the first things they wanted to do was tailor it to their liking, including landscaping the back garden. They hired professional landscapers who began to dig up the garden. Rather than finding old tree roots or even an old time capsule, the landscapers found the skeletal remains of a woman. Around a decade later, a man named Alfred Powell had lived in the property's detached garage. In 1983, he'd been friends with a 30-year-old woman named Susan K. Nixon and was the last person to have been with her before she disappeared. Suzanne's friends reported she'd left with Powell to go get pizza. Naturally, he was the first suspect when Suzanne was reported missing. He answered the door to police in a blood-stained shirt, blood he claimed to have belonged to a raccoon. He said Suzanne had dropped him off after pizza and she hadn't seen him since, but police quickly discovered that was untrue when they found Suzanne's body wrapped in a trash bag in a tool shed attached to the garage. Powell was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison for the murder in 1953, and the property he'd once lived in changed hands multiple times before the Coates bought it. The body discovered in the back garden was found with a calendar from 1982 and a photograph of a black woman. Police cross-referenced the photo with a database of people who disappeared in 1982 and came across the name Sandra Stephan. Sandra's dental records matched the body, and the children she left behind were able to lay her to rest. Sandra had gone missing in late 1982 after picking up a hitchhiker. After the body was discovered, her friends identified Powell as the hitchhiker, but he denied the murder. Finally, the day before the case went to trial in 2018, Powell confessed to the murder and was given another 15 years to life sentence. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knots, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.